Hi, everybody. Welcome to Language and Use. It is our last week 9, and it's a totally online module. Can I please also remind you to complete your task, which was basically a lesson that you felt worked well, hopefully one from your prac. And I'd also like you just to write some information about why it was so successful, what made it such a great lesson in your classroom, how did the students respond to it, and just think about the task that I showed you, the secret to understanding my textbook, and the reasons that I gave as to why it works so well for me, and also the fact that I kept replicating it meant that it was actually working quite well for the students. Okay, so the agenda for this week is basically we're analysing focused texts. So linked to one of the readings that you had to complete for this week, we're looking at writing a focused text for a class and the way that you'd start to put one together prior to actually teaching it to the class. So looking at your curriculum, looking at your literacy progressions and putting it together. We're focusing on a science task this week. We're also going to spend a bit of time looking at narrative text and persuasive text, simply because I think some of you are using it in your actual assignment, narrative more probably for building the field, and also some time looking at your assessment task too. Okay, so looking at introducing focused text, I'm just going to read through the slide a bit. So a focused text guides teachers in choosing the powerful language they want to hand over to the students. So in a way, you're modelling it and you're allowing the students to see how you would write it, and then it's over to them to use some of that technical language when they're actually writing their piece. It includes the text type, the grammar, and the vocabulary that you would like for that particular focused text. And in this case, we're going to look at a science focused text. You also need to check the language against the literacy capability, so going to the ACARA document and also the literacy progressions, and in this case we will look at science. Writing a focused text is an 8-step backwards planning process, and I'm going to go through those in a minute, beginning with the curriculum documents and mapping forward, but also mapping back from the actual text. So we might start having a look at that now. So writing the focused text in 8 steps. We start with the curriculum first. So like I said, we're looking at science, and then we start to set learning goals for that actual text. We draft our focus text, and we also analyse and revise. We choose your language learning goals. We identify any visuals in step 7. So you might decide to include some visuals. In this case, we're looking at solar system in science. So that might sort of go hand in hand with the text that you're learning. Remember, a lot of students in your class are visual learners, and it works well to make a text more visual for their benefit and for the whole class, obviously. And then right at the end, you're typing out the final text. So this is the text that you're going to present to students, and in effect, you're modelling what you'd like them to present to you using all of the technical language that you have within those documents, looking at ACARA and obviously the literacy capabilities. Okay, so if we were writing a science-focused text, we're following 8 basic steps. So you start with the curriculum, so you gather your science and your curriculum documents, you go online, you download them. Secondly, you set your learning goals. So goal 1, for example, might be for students to understand the place of the sun, the moon and the earth in the solar system and the universe. Number 3, you collect useful text. So you're looking for focused text from published textbooks or online on science websites to inform your own text that you're writing. and you start the process of drafting your focus text, and that will be the one that you use in the classroom with the students. And number 5, we start to analyse and revise. So when you have a draft that covers your required content and includes some technical language, so think of the technical language that you will require within that science curriculum, and you need to cross-check it for appropriate language features in the Australian Curriculum Literary Continuum, which is part of the literacy capabilities. So ACARA 2013 and also the Science Literacy Progression ACARA 2018. So those documents will kind of frame what you're going to be writing in the focus text. So you're looking at the stage level you're at, you're looking at the unit, and what kind of language that requires. And in this case, we're looking at Year 7. So you will see later on in the slides, you're looking at what is needed at a Year 6 level and also what they're working towards in a Year 8 level science text. So here you've got more of an example of how to write the science focus text straight from the literacy continuum. So text knowledge element, you use developing knowledge of the structure and features of learning area text to comprehend and compose a range of more complex texts for identified purposes. And in this case, it's for the unit in science. You can also look at the grammar knowledge element, so looking more deeply at the language that you're going to use when you're writing your text. So you're going to use simple, compound, or complex sentence structures. And we talked a bit about sentence structures the other week. So it's like what I said to you, it's a matter of looking at the text you're actually using and finding examples there rather than doing isolated examples on a worksheet. So within your textbook or your focus text, you're looking for examples. Okay, number 6, you're choosing your language learning goals. So this is number 6 in the 8 steps to writing the focus text. In this one, you're identifying the technical vocabulary, and we've spoken about this before. Every KLA has very different vocabulary, and that is what students struggle with because, especially in Year 7, they start to do 7 or 8 separate subjects, and each one of those has terminology within it that's very specific to that subject area and obviously that unit. Also, grammatical resources that you want your students to use with confidence. So if we looked at vocabulary, isolate the words that you actually want to put in your text, and they're words that you want your students to familiarise themselves with. So for example, you could talk about orbiting, so orbiting of planets. You could explain the lunar eclipse and also indirect alignment. So all of those require extra information and teaching. In number 7, you identify any visuals, and I'll give you some examples in the next few slides. So any visuals, diagrams or maps that will need to be explicitly taught, because again, they will kind of represent the language or the text that you're teaching to that class. And going back to our visual learner, they need that. They need that initially in order to understand the text. And then obviously as you're unpacking the text, they have that visual in their mind that they can go back to. And then right at the end, you're typing out the final text. And this will be what you use with your class in order to teach that part of the science syllabus. So it's sort of different from what we've been looking at in class because you're actually composing one separate text. And you can go back to the document, the e-reading that we had online. I just thought I'd go over narratives a little bit because I know that some of you are using narratives in your building of the field to support whether you're doing a historical recount, so the crossover with that KLA. So narratives are very different, obviously. Some provide entertainment, some will have a problem that needs to be resolved. They provide insights into the human condition, like if some of you are doing convicts, for example, there's picture books looking at child convicts, and you might use some of those in your building the field. They might captivate, comfort, distract, or amuse. And just making a point that not all narratives follow the pattern of orientation, complication, and resolution. So just remember that some actually start with a complication. And just a little bit on persuasive text, because I know that some of you are also doing that within your assignment. So basically, the genre associated with persuasive purposes are argumentative text, expositions, discussions, and debates. Most of you are looking at expositions. What is a purpose? Obviously, to persuade people to act in a certain way. Sample curriculum contexts, we could have topics like save our forests, junk food in canteens, plastic bags should be banned. And there's a lot of things online, obviously, that you can use for your text one. Obviously, for text two, being the joint construction, you might need to think a little bit more about the subject that you choose for that one. And again, I've said that you can use part of something that is online for your part of the joint construction, and you go into the classroom and you have that, and then you start to construct with your students. What's the structure of the exposition? And most of you would have had to write that when you're annotating your actual text. On the left-hand side, we have the structure. It's basically the same as the statement of position. So your issue and your background information. It's an appeal, so an appeal to you to do something about the plastic bag situation, for example. You might preview your arguments in this first part of your exposition, but again, that's optional. And then you start your arguments. So you have your point and then you elaborate. With your elaboration, you might put statistics or extra information there, some facts perhaps to support what you're saying. And then obviously at the end, you reiterate that appeal because you're trying to persuade a person about your point of view. For example, the one that I've got here is straight from your textbook. Again, you can use things from Language in Context. They have quite a lot of examples about different text types. So this one is about paying for plastic bags. So again, you know, the initial sort of statement, then you've got some information there. Australians are using 6 million bags a year, 1 trillion used annually in the world. So obviously you're trying to get your point across, persuade people that it would be great to alleviate plastic bags altogether, or at least cut the use of them down. Making people pay for plastic bags, which is what we've decided to do in Australia. Encouraging people to carry the reusable bags with them and just keep using those as a way of cutting down. And again, the argument, you know, plastic bags might initially be cheaper, but they don't last as long. And then position statement, issue, appeal, and preview of arguments. So just a teaching and learning cycle. Remember that when you're writing up your 4 lessons for your assessment, so going back and just giving you a bit more structure and support with that, you must follow this cycle. And there are different ways of doing it. Like most of you will have lesson 1 as building the field. Lesson 2, you'll do the modelling and the annotation of your text. Lesson 3 will be mainly the joint construction. It could flow on into lesson 4, which is the independent use of the genre. So allowing students to have a task that they independently complete. You can have variations on that, but they're the main sort of 4 lessons. And like I've been saying to some students, it's not the ideal. You wouldn't have 4 lessons like this in a classroom, but obviously for the purposes of our assignment, that is the way we will structure it. So follow that kind of guideline that you have as well. Just a bit more information about language features. A lot of you are asking, do you have a list of language features? Well, there's some of the ones that I've come up with, and it really depends on your actual text as well, because if you have a persuasive text, for example, you have more emotive language and persuasive language. So they're just general language features that apply to most texts that you will look at. And again, you need to see what stage your students are at as to what language features you want to teach them. So focus on three, like I said, three that you teach in the first text and then model it again in the joint construction. But obviously you can draw and show other language features within your text as well. Okay, so please follow the template that is under the assessment and submission tab. Make sure that your 4 lessons follow the teaching and learning cycle. Include the 2 annotated texts, so one sourced online from a textbook. This text is an annotated example of your text type. Text 2 is a joint construction. It's created by students in your class, your imaginary class, because we're not really carrying out a joint construction. A few people have done one in their prac and they're quite welcome to use that joint construction within their assignment. So if you have any further queries or questions, just email me, or if you need any further support. And just remember the due date is Friday, November the 8th by 5 p.m. So thank you for listening to week 9.